Hi guys, welcome to another Facehammer show. In this show, me, Russ the Faceville, is going to talk all about the new FAQ and erratas that have just dropped, which doesn't sound very exciting, but actually it's really, really exciting because these are not just little tweaks. There's sweeping changes across the game, which I think is going to make the game way, way, way better than it already is, and I already love Old World, so I'm really excited to get into this. I'm going to give you the rules changes as they're written and they're available on the Warcom website. You can go have a look, but I'm going to give you my insight into what that means practically on the tabletop, what that might affect in terms of meta, how that might affect list design. There's some huge changes, like round poison, round challenges, round magic. Without further ado, I'm going to get into it, but it is going to be a long show. I would say please bear with me. And again, if you're here watching this and you're going to stay with me, thank you so much. And if you want to hit the subscribe and like, that helps me out tons. Also, let's get into the show. So firstly, where do you see the FAQs? Where do you get them? They are on the Warhammer community website, and you go to this downloads and you go to the old world. It'll bring this up and it's got the updated date here, and you can just download them or browse them in your errata in your browser. There's obviously the legend files are there as well, and some miscellaneous scenarios and things like that. So let's look at the first one. I'm going to go through the main rule book first, because changes in the Ravening Hordes and Forces of Fantasy will make more sense than when you know what the main core rule changes are. What I would say as well is that if you're thinking about where are the Arcane Journal FAQs, they sit in the Ravening Hordes or Forces of Fantasy documents. So this is the Old World FAQ and errata. This is the core rules for version 1.5.1. It does feel like a version 1.5 of the game because these changes are huge. So we have things in blue, which were previously errated, are going to have a change point, and magenta is new. In this show, I'm only going to talk about the new things. I'm not going to talk about the other rules and FAQs in there. If you have any questions, put it in the comments. I'll try and get back to you. If you're unclear or it doesn't make sense to you, please feel free to chat. And if you want to come on the Discord Chalking the Rules section, that's more than okay as well. You can. There is still a lot of ambiguity around a few things and interpretation because it is words. So there we go, English language for you. So we've got the combat result bonus. So this is a big change. So this is in close order. A formation with unit strength of 10 may claim a bonus of +1 combat result. That means that it used to be 5. It used to be nothing. Now it's 5. Now it's 10. That means things like a heavy chariot, like a heavy chaos chariot, won't get a +1. So it's quite a massive change, and it kind of encourages people to take bigger units. So like even minimum units of heavy cavalry of 5 or 4, 4 won't get anything. Well, 4 will, because 4 won't get anything. So 4 used to get +1, but because they were unit strength 8. Now you need 5 to be unit strength 10, but if you take 1 casualty, you're going to lose that bonus. So it's kind of encouraging you to take bigger units for ones that are meant to have static combat res. It does mean that infantry will be less prone to being kind of hit by multiple little things like chaos chariots, because the close order bonus stacked. So hopefully you can get around that. It also means that characters on monsters, unless they've got 10 wounds combined, they will not get +1. So I think the Chaos Lord and Dragon does, but most are around like 8, 9. They don't get up to 10 wounds. Huge change. Magical vortexes, lots of changes about vortexes in this document. So it basically says that change the second paragraph, that some vortexes move at the start of each turn, often by scattering. And it says, should it move over a unit but end on a unit, then you move it the smallest amount possible in any direction. And this doesn't really sound like a lot. You probably go, what does that mean? That's how it works, right? No, the way it worked before is if you clipped a unit with a template, a vortex, it has to keep moving in that same direction until it can land on the tabletop. It can clear, right? Which would mean that if you angled this down the side of a unit, or in multiple units were close together, it could eventually move through like 5 or 6 units, even though it's only scattered like 1 inch. What this does, this means that if you clip a unit, you'd move it back in front of that unit. So it won't just ping through things. That's good and bad, because a lot of vortexes have effects if you move through them. So you can hit units without actually it not blocking them. So there's a good point for your vortex use, but also it stops silliness of putting a pillar of fire through 5 or 6 units because it just carries on. So it's a bit of a nerf and a bonus in a different way. Casting spells. Now this is a huge change. So obviously magic, what you do at the moment is you add your level of wizardry to your casting roll. But now what you do is you divide your level of wizardry by 2 and add that as a bonus. So if a level 2 wizard is casting, then you're going to get +1 because his level of wizardry divided by 1. So basically means a level 1 and 2 get +1 and a level 3 and 4 get +2. Before that was you're going to get +1, +2, +3, +4. So what this means is that when you write an army list, if you've already got the spells you want with signatures or with other means, having a level 4 is only for a spell and it costs 30 points. So a level 3 wizard is still as effective at casting and unbinding, and the gulf between a level 1 and a level 4 is a lot smaller. This also, in a way, makes any ability that gives you bonuses to cast more powerful, and also makes bound spells more powerful because you're not getting +4 to dispel them, you're only going to get +2. Now, that saying, before you will get really excited, many casting values and many bound spell values have been errated. So as we get to them, we'll talk about them. But basically, there's been a reduction in anything high up in the casting values of 1, I think, so roughly, and bound spells likewise. But this is just to bring the disparity between level 1 and 4 narrower. It narrows that gap and also makes it a little bit harder to cast things. So whereas before you might have a 7 to cast, now you're going to need you to roll a 3, which basically don't roll a double 1 with your level 4. It is going to be successful. Now it's like, okay, I need to roll a 5 with my level 4. So it's immediately reducing the odds of successfully casting. And that's obviously because in the studio, people thought that the magic was too strong. And we've seen that in the meta, that so many people take wizards, so many people take a level 4. This is also great news for dwarfs. Because dwarfs with the magic resistance and with the +1 or +2 or +3 from the anvil suddenly feel very anti-magic. I don't know if they've adjusted those values, but I'd be very surprised if they have. And I think that's a great change. We've got a change to 8 and 9 on the miscast. So it says, however, the wizard cannot attempt to cast any more spells for the remainder of the turn. Now, this used to drain all your wizards. So all your wizards wouldn't be able to cast anymore. So the fact now that you can cast with other wizards, that's a big change, because that result was devastating for some armies. Then we have the Wizardly Dispel. So this change here, it says wizards that are engaged in combat can only be nominated to dispel spells that target them or their unit. This was because there was a weird thing where you could be in combat, your wizard against their wizard, they're casted an assailment, and the wizard in combat can't do anything about it. So it just means that if the wizard's targeted, then they can, their unit is targeted, they can actually dispel. It makes sense. It's a nice change. We've got dispel roll and dispel results. And again, that's just to reflect the casting. So it's your wizard, level wizard divided by 2, rounded up. So again, it's the same. Level 1, level 2 is +1. Level 3, level 4 is +2. You've got dispel remains in place. So it says that you may attempt a fated or wizardly dispel, as long as the wizard is within range of the wizard that casts a spell, or in the case of the vortex, the template. Now this changes because previously you had to be in range of the wizard, so you could drop the vortex and run away with the wizard, and you couldn't get rid of the bloody thing, especially with Pillar of Fire. That was devastating. There's another change to Pillar of Fire coming up, which is going to make it a lot fairer and a lot less more impactful. So again, that's a big change. It's all around dispelling the vortex if it's in range, which makes sense, because if there's a magical swirly thing, your wizard should be able to disrupt that rather than be wherever the wizard is. So the ward save rule here, that's just to tidy up to say that they work like an armor save, but they're not modified and they're not negated by a rule that says you don't get a save, an armor save. I think that's all that really says there. Fight in rank. So this is saying when 2 opposing units are engaged in combat by any row of models, flank or file, then you have your fighting rank. Okay. Any model within a fighting rank and within a number of inches equal to its movement can fight. So this means that you can't have a long line. I know people talk about line hammer. People done YouTube videos on it. I've been to like 6 tournaments. Nobody has ever strung their units out in lines like a twat. So I've never seen it, but apparently it was a thing. But it actually means that you can't do that anymore because it's your movement. And supporting attacks is the same, basically. So if you're in a rank or file directly behind, so a weapon that allows them to make a supporting attack. So if they are directly behind the fighting rank and with a number of inches equal to their movement, you cannot make support to the flank or rear, unless you're elves. So they've got some special rules around that. But anyway, then we have charging units. So this charging units change, that's just so the initiative only applies in the combat phase. I don't know why that would matter, but that's there. There must have been some fringe case. So the change to fly is interesting. So this basically means now that you cannot pursue with a fly move or follow up with a fly move. So if you're you're chasing somebody down, you can actually protect your units from flyers by having a buffer behind them because they go along the ground, which basically means that you can kind of protect against those flying pursuit moves. We've also got frenzy. So during a turn in which it made a charge move, or during the turn after it made a follow-up move, a frenzied unit has +1 attack. And a frenzied rider does not confer this to their mount, vice versa. So what's interesting here is you only get it on the charge. You do not get it all the time. So frenzy used to be you just get the extra attack all the time. Now people might think that the other bullet points, like the fact you have to charge, things like that, they will still apply. This only changes the first paragraph of the rule. It doesn't change the whole rule. So you still got to abide by all of those. So changes to impact hits. So basically your impact hits go before you get into the the choose combat and fight sub phase. And so basically they happen before challenges, before anything else. So they're just going to be first. So when you choose the unit to fight, impact hits are immediate. It's not initiative 10, they're just immediate. Impetuous, this is a big change. Lots of armies will love this. If during, it makes things like Dragon Princes viable, it makes like green skins less susceptible to being like led around. Your errantry war army might be more viable. Basically, you take a leadership test. It's not a 50-50. So that is huge. That means that you're basically going to be able to control your impetuous units a lot more easier if they are disciplined and have high leadership, as it probably should be. The impetuous goblin is not the same as an impetuous dragon prince. So that's great. I love that change. Large target, so don't benefit from cover, obviously. And they do have this extra thing where previously a unit that shot a large target, because every rank can see it, they would shoot, say you had like 8 handgunners 4 deep, you would shoot with the entire unit. Now you only shoot with 1 extra rank, and this is 2 or 3 if you're on a hill. So basically that means that your whole unit doesn't shoot just because it's a large target, which is a little bit of a protection. There's a massive change coming up to poison, which is going to stop the Night Goblin and the Tomb King Bowman units being absolutely disgusting. And here we go, next one. Each roll of hit of a natural 6 makes them apply +2 to one of their rolls to wound. So essentially, that means that you're getting to get bonuses to wound rather than an auto wound. So it's basically gonna half. So if you shoot something that, I mean, it doesn't affect on lower toughness things, it kind of works as well. But if you're shooting like a dragon and you need 6s to wound it, now you're going to need 4s, and it's not an automatic wound. So you have to then roll again, and half of those are going to go away. So there's some protection. It doesn't make poison rubbish, because against lower toughness things, it's still good. I mean, you're getting +2, then you're probably going to be wounded on 2s. So one in 6 out of the 6s. So it's not that much different. I do think it's a nice change. It gives you a little bit of variety, and it means that those big obnoxious poison blocks of 70 archers or whatever people were taking, they just shouldn't be a thing. They're just horrendous. So regen, this one is really interesting, and it's not very apparent. So it basically says now, right? So on page 176 previously, if I get it out, because this is really important. It says it's a regeneration save, right? And you basically save the wound and it's done, right? And you think, well, this just says the same thing, right? Immediately after a wound is lost. No, because if you get hit by a weapon that does D6 wounds, okay, you take your armor save and your ward save. If you failed those, you would take D6 wounds, and then as each wound is applied, you get your regen save. So regen doesn't stop the whole D6 wounds. It's a roll against each individual wound in that D6 damage. Because of the wording change here, immediately after a wound is lost. So in order to do that in the attack sequence, you have to multiply the damage out. So essentially, armor and ward are before you multiply damage out. Regen is after you multiply damage out. I think they probably should have put an example in here, because I think it was not immediately obvious. It almost, you read it and think it's exactly the same. It's not. Regen is not a save. It's like a regenerate the wound save. It's not even a save. It's just, do you get the wound back? So basically, it's not a save. So it does kind of, have quite a large impact, where regen now is after multiplying damage. So it makes multi-damage things more effective against regen units. You could argue no, because it could be more effective, because if you have a 1 in 6 chance, because you've got a 6-up regen, and it's a 1 or nothing, then it's very swingy. You either stop it all or you take D6 damage. Whereas now, if you took D6 damage, 6 wounds, you roll 6 dice, you're probably going to save 1, so you take 5. So it's going to be a lot more less swingy on that save, whether it's all or nothing. So it's a good thing. Whereas wards still work like that, and probably as they should do. So a pretty big change for regen there. Let's get into stomp attacks. So stomp attacks are basically made after all other attacks, even those at initiative 1. So they've kind of put stomps, and because before they did this, they went impact initiative 10, stomps initiative 1. Now what they've done is they've kind of separated them out and said they are always last, always first, which is pretty good. Then you've got stupidity. There's big change actually. So unless fleeing or engaged in combat, take a stupid test. If you fail, then basically you cannot move, cannot shoot, cast spells, cannot dispel, and you have to hold if you get charged. So basically, it's a big change to stupidity, where it's actually a lot more impactful than what it was. So that's kind of important. Swift stride, a little bit of a weird change, but a good one, is that actually people didn't know this. Swift stride, you used to be able to use it after you roll your dice, just to see if you want to use it or not. So you could flee, then go, did I go far enough or off the table? No, I've gone really far. I'm not going to use swift stride. Oh no, I didn't go very far. I'll use my swift stride. Now you've got to do it before. So before you roll, you add it. A lot of people played it that way. That's kind of the fair way to play it, like do you roll Swift Stride or not? But actually, by the letter of the rules, you could pick. So you could roll your dice first, then choose. So I know it was really useful for pursuit and things and flee moves. But there you go. Change to Vanguard, which is pretty big. It says units that make a Vanguard move cannot declare a charge during their first turn. That actually makes Vanguard a really difficult choice, because if you Vanguard, they could potentially run right up to you. You can't charge, then run past you, or run up to like an infantry unit in marching column with drilled right in front of you. And if you don't, if you Vanguarded, you can't charge them. So then they just go wide, charge you, and you're like, oh, right, great. So it's a pretty good nerf to the Bretonnian Vanguarding Pegasus Knight unit, because that could get a turn 1 charge, which I guess is why it's there. I'm a little bit disappointed with that. I think it means now that Vanguard is one of those things you're just not going to use, because you're going to have to be super careful, and I think you end up just not moving anywhere. Not so sure about that one. So Warband. So you cannot use your leadership modifier to do a restraint test or impetuous test. So Warband gives you extra leadership based on your rank bonus, and this means that basically you can't use it for things that an unruly mob would be less likely to be restrained and less likely to, not be impetuous. So it makes perfect sense. So the change to quick turn, looking at it, is because in the book, it previously said that after moving, unless you charge, march, or flee. So now that meant if you moved in other parts of the game or other sequences, you could do this. You can't do it anymore. So essentially you only do it after you move in the remaining moves, which is what it's intended to be. I guess you could have got like push back and then you could have pivoted, because that's a move technically, things like that, or pursuit move, for example. So yeah, it's quite interesting that that's changed. We've got skirmishers. So it says they will remain close until the combat is over, at which point the models must separate, moving the smallest amount possible to once again adopt skirmish formation. So this is a bit of a weird one, because some people, when you have a skirmish unit, they rank up when you fight them, right? Some people, what they would do is separate them out, but there's no rule for that. And some people end up like spreading the unit out in a massive area where you just change the footprint completely. And here it says the smallest amount possible. So I guess that's a millimeter, because so you're just not in base, because obviously an inch is your coherency, but you don't have to be an inch away. So this means that after you fight, the unit just slightly separates by a millimeter across the board. So effectively you just leave them as they are, but they're still in a skirmish formation. So it just means they are skirmishers. They're not in a ranked up formation with flanks and all the rest of it, but you don't just like spread them out in a big blob. And then this change to skirmishers. Unit of skirmishers may charge an enemy unit that is visible to more than half of its models when charges are declared. And it says here, add the following to the end of the second paragraph. If any skirmishers are unable to form up, unit could have lost its coherency as described on 184. And I believe that means that models die when they lose their coherency. You have to remove models. So basically that means that you have to essentially, this makes skirmishes a lot harder to use. You're not just like concertinaing across the battlefield like in a big blob lines like this. You're going to have to be a lot more careful, and obviously you need more than one model to see, so you can't just put like one model poking out to charge and stuff like that. So, and obviously you could block line of sight to your own models, so you need to be a bit careful with that. So it means just massive blobs of skirmishers become a little bit more unwieldy, as they should be, really. Now, big changes to infantry. So we've got the following changes. So it says, except during a turn in which it charged, The fighting rank of this unit has this rule is a raid in combat order is not 1 but 2 ranks deep. So this is the press of battle rule, right? In other words, models that are directly behind and in base contact with models in the actual fighting rank are also considered to be within the fighting rank. So, so if you don't charge, you get to fight 2 ranks deep. This is a huge change. This means that you're going to be a lot less susceptible to being charged and not being able to fight back. You're going to get a lot more damage from infantry units, which feels right. And also you've got massed infantry. When determining combat results, if one side has a higher unit strength than the other and includes 1 or more units with this rule, that side may get a +1/+1 combat result. So this is outnumber basically, but it only really applies to infantry. So you need to have infantry units with this rule in the fight. It doesn't mean that the unit strength for your other units doesn't count. It just means that you need to have 1 unit with massed infantry rule to get it. We've also got the parry has come in. So sword and shield, you can deflect blows. So you get a +1 to your armor save up to a maximum of +3. So that's infantry with a 3+ armor save. That's insanely good, right? So with a parry save, that means if you've got like heavy armor and a shield and you can parry, that's great. You got a really good save. You get more static res, more close order, smaller individual models you strength for 5 or less than 10 would have got bonuses. They don't get bonuses anymore. So it's really good. Heavy infantry have all the same rules, so they've got the same ones. So those 3 rules, that's a huge boost to the effectiveness of infantry. So we can see immediately magic's been nerfed. We've got changes to like regen, which is big, and then we've got the infantry changes, which is massive. And so it's really important that you think about all these compound effects, and your army list suddenly units that were good are going to be less good. Infantry is going to be more viable, and there's more stuff coming up that's going to make infantry even better, which I'll get onto in a minute. So we've got the weapon of war. So this war machines basically means you can just pivot, make follow-up moves as normal. So it's just saying that they can pivot round. You do this. It's a skirmish anyway. They've all got 360 line of sight. It's just a thematic thing to like point at what you want to do to. So this as well, enemy shooting. So what this means is previously, like if I had a lord on a demonic mount, I could put him in unit of infantry. He wasn't targetable, but now he would be because he's cavalry and they're infantry. So this means that characters that are mounted need to really be prevented in mounted units, and infantry and infantry units, vice versa. So that kind of makes sense. That's kind of most people have played it like that anyway because it's more thematic. It's how the armies work. But you could have put like a boar boss in the middle of an orc unit, for example. It says, just look out, sir. So if a character is hit by a shooting attack and there are 5 or more rank and file models of the same troop type as the character in the unit, it gets a look out, sir. So that's the same thing, really. It means that you have to be the same troop type. That's the big change there. Challenges and mounts. So this is a big change. So this makes infantry even better. So if the participant is slain before their rival or a mount can make an attack, those attacks are lost. So the way it worked previously, you have like a dragon lord goes into an infantry unit, the unit champion challenges you, your rider kills him, your dragon piles in, you stomp him, you've done max 5 overkill, you're at 6 combat res, 1 for the wound on the champion, and then 5 for the 5 for the overkill bonus, and then probably close order. So you're already up by loads. Now, what this means now is if your rider goes in and does a wound and kills the champion, you get 1. That's it. No more attacks, nothing. So this means now that putting a dragon into a ranked up unit of infantry with a champion in it on its own, unsupported, is going to be a really stupid idea. Now, actually, this makes loads of sense from a thematic point of view, that you'd get bogged down and, you're fighting a massed infantry unit. It's actually really, really cool. So I really like this change. I think it means you're going to have to be clever. You're going to have units to support your dragons. You're going to have that, that cavalry unit that goes in with, and the dragon comes in on the side. You're going to have to use your monsters a lot more intelligently, or a charge throwing in, kill the champion out the unit, and then they got no champion, and the dragon goes in next turn, whatever. But it's a really good change. And we're not even stopped at changes there. We've got more changes. This is to weapons. Okay, so flail, one of my personal favorite. I run a flail all the time. So it's strength +2, -2 AP, armor bane 1 now. And it says a flail strength and armor bane only apply when they charge. So before it was the first round, so you could get charged and you would still get the bonus. Now it's only if you charge. The good thing is that AP -2 still applies, which is why I like the flail. But anyway, there you go. Another big change. More than one combat weapon. So it says if a unit is engaged in combat is equipped with 2 or more combat weapons, you must choose which weapon it will fight with when it's chosen to fight. So you don't have to pick it for the whole combat. So you could take a charge, go hand weapon shield, they lose their lance bonus, whatever. You switch to your great weapons, then you take them down. So you can actually swap weapons each between rounds, which I think is great. It means that now you might buy halberds for your tomb guard. You know, you might actually take mixed weapons, take great weapons, hand weapons, and shields, because the shields and hand weapons you go into max defense, and then when you get into the further rounds, you go great weapon, whatever, or you charge. You might want to use the great weapon to get you the initiative bonus. It makes it way more flexibility, way more choice. Makes perfect sense. I really like it. Halberds have been changed, so now they're +1 strength and -1 AP, but they're -2. Against if you charge, you get an extra AP if you charge, and they've got armor bane and they require 2 hands. So actually now a halberd, because the armor piercing, that's actually pretty good. I think it means that it gives you that kind of impetus to charge with them rather than just take the charge. Obviously, like with the infantry, you get to fight in 2 ranks if they charge you, so maybe you want to be charged, I don't know. The Morning Star. So it says it changed the weapon profile as follows. So it's again +1 armor bane, only applies when you charge. So basically, giving it armor bane, and they put this charge restriction on, which is the changes there. So the lance notes have changed. I think this is just because it says you have to use a hand weapon, so that's been removed. So you can use the lance, and then you don't have to use a hand weapon. You could have a great weapon or something. Max armor value. This is a nice change. There is now a maximum to your armor save. Infantry and cavalry can never be better than a 2. Monsters, chariots, and war machines can never be better than a 3+. So you can't have a 2+ save monster anymore. And any bonuses, regardless of their source, that would improve the armor's modifier have no effect. So I'm assuming this is you would apply negatives after, so at a max of 3. So even if you had technically a 1-up save and then you got hit by AP2, it's not like Age of Sigmar where you go back to 3. You would be at 3-up capped, and then you'd go to a 5-up. So I think this is a really, really good change. I actually think this should have been put in Age of Sigmar ages ago. It would have made the game way better. And I think it would have got rid of a lot of the jank that happened in OS3, which is one of the reasons I don't play the game anymore. So we've got changes to dead or fled. Each enemy unit has been reduced to 25% of its starting strength or less at the end of the battle, or if its unit strength is equal to its starting wounds. So this basically means that to 25% of its starting wounds, it's worth a number of victory points up to 50%. So basically this means that if you reduce its wounds value of a single model, so dragon, to like 1 wound, you're going to get points, because it's not an all or nothing, because you've got less than 25% of your starting wounds. So basically it means that single models now give up points if they're wounded but not dead, which is a great change. I think it's well worth having that in the game. I just thought it would have been useful to have that from the start. Now, big change on magic. So Pillar of Fire, it no longer is a decision where you move it. It scatters. You cannot pick the direction. So welcome change, which makes Pillar of Fire less obnoxious. And it says that any enemy unit that moves through the template or the template moves over takes D3+3 strength 3 hits with AP -2. So what's nice about this change means is that you used to be dangerous terrain. Now you take the damage. If you move through a vortex, you take the damage of the vortex, which is great. Well, for the Pillar of Fire, I think each one has got changed. Same wording. There might be some differences. Arcane Urgency, values changed down to a 9. Cowardly Fight. So this is the adjustments I talked about because of the reduction in bonuses. Some of the higher end cast spells have been dropped by a point. So like Steed of Shadow, Demonic Vessel. Vortex of Chaos. Again, it says that any unit, friend or foe that moves through the template takes the damage. So it's just the damage happens if you move through it. It's not just dangerous terrain. Changes to Infernal Gateway, Flaming Sword, Summon Elemental Spirit. Again, it's the same thing. When it does, the scatters D6, enemy unit that moves through it. So it's the same wording. Earthen Ramparts is down to a 9. Travel Mystical Pathways has been changed completely. It says if the target unit is fleeing, not already moved, you may immediately remove it anywhere completely within 12 and not within 6. So the change here, it used to be within, not completely within, which meant you could do really obnoxious things with it. So that's a big nerf to Travel Mystical Pathway. Shield of Safari has been changed. Confounding Convocations. Again, these are just adjustments of the cast values. If you've got the magic card, I'd just get a marker and I'd just change them to match the FAQ. That's what I plan to do. So then you've got Spirit Vortex. And it says, while within 8 of one or more vortexes, -1 to their leadership characteristic. So that means you cannot spam vortexes and stack the effect. So there's no stacking. Curse of Years change to this. These again are just to make them in line with the new magic bonuses. You've got Foot of Gork or Mork, and this is obviously it says whilst in play, it's a difficult terrain. The template scatters 2d6 during the start of turn subphase. Any unit friend or foe that moves through the template or the template moves over takes a shitload of damage. So, that's good. Ogre Blade has been increased in points to 75, which is quite a big change because that actually takes away some of the combos you could do. So the Ogre Blade, it was probably way too popular. They've changed the value on that. Obviously, you've got the previous changes on that Battalion Helm, but we know those. Ruby Ring of Ruin is now 35 points. And it's only a bound level of 1 because obviously we've had the magic stuff go up and down, so it makes it a little bit less reliable. Obviously, it was taken by pretty much everyone in every list, so good to see that change. Change to the reference sheet, which tells you about the changes to the casting, and that's going to be it for the big changes. So that's the changes to the rules, and then we've got the FAQ, which is the clarifications about what happens when or what happens if. So if a scatter roll or an object cross beyond the battlefield, you just remove it, so it scatters off the table. If a model is required to take a leadership test using its own leadership, can it use leadership of a different model, the general, for example? Well, obviously no. I don't know why that's a question. Some single-use magic special items and items require a leadership test. Do they count as being used even when the test is failed? Yes. So if you fail the leadership test, you don't get to use it anyway, but it counts. Can different saves be combined together to improve the save value? For example, has 2 ward saves, can they be combined together? Obviously not. Some of these questions I find a bit ridiculous. How many spells can a wizard attempt to cast during a single phase? If you know a magic vortex, magic missile, can they do both in the same? It says a wizard can only cast a number of spells each to the level of wizardry per turn, but can attempt to cast multiple spells during a single phase. In other words, should level 2 know 2 magic missiles and 1 magic vortex, they can only cast 2 of them, but may cast both during the same phase. Now that's quite interesting. I didn't know if that was actually the case. I know I've seen that in places where items give you extra spells, but yeah, okay. But I think I remember early doors, because a magic missile is like a shooting attack and you can only make 1 shooting attack. So you're like, can you make multiple shooting attacks? Can you cast? But then the magic says you can cast all the spells you know. So it's like that caveats that. So I remember having a discussion with the game's rules writer about that when we were at the first tournament. And that's totally fine. So it's good. If it remains in play as 2 casting values, which is used, basically you use the lowest one. How many remains in place can I attempt to dispel? As many as you wish, as many as your opponent has in play, as many as you're able. So, you could just try and get rid of all of them if you've got wizards in range. Obviously, you can be outclassed in the art and stuff like that, so you've got to be a little bit careful. If a single unit straddles 2 arcs of an enemy unit and wishes to charge, is it always considered to be in the charge that gives it the least advantage? No. This is only the case when you cannot determine which arc of an enemy unit is charging. If it's clear the majority of the models have one particular arc, even if it consists of only one model, it will charge into that arc. So this is something that I had this brought to my attention, where people were saying that because there's like a bit of word that says if it's unclear, you charge the least advantage. So people were saying, like, if I had a dragon in your flank arc, but 1% of my base was in the front arc, it would have to go in the front, which didn't seem right to me, especially as the diagram of the orc unit completely debunked that. And I said, that doesn't make sense. So I fired this question in because I said, well, this needs to be clarified. If, like, these competitive top players are using it, then you need to stop it because it's not right. And so it's ruled this way. So if a unit charges an enemy that's defending a low linear obstacle, can it stop on top of it? No. You do count as being in base contact with the unit, though. That's another thing I've seen, because it says you're in touching the obstacle, but that's like their front rank, so you are touching them. So people saying you can't even you only make supported attacks. It's a load of drivel. Shooting, can a model that chooses to stand and shoot as a charge reaction attempt to cast a magic missile or a vortex? No. It says models cannot cast magic missiles or vortex after marching. Does it include bound spells? Yes. So you can't march and do those, which is another thing that I've seen people do. If a unit's fighting rank is engaged with 2 enemy units, one of which is a lone character engaged in a challenge, can models within the unit's fighting rank ignore the character even if they are closer to it than the enemy unit or their attacks lost? Models not engaged in challenge cannot direct their attacks against models that are. In other words, any models that would normally have to direct their attacks against the character are free to direct them against the other unit they are engaged with. So yeah. So basically, a character like blocking half the unit because they've challenged out a model on the other side of the unit doesn't block you at all. You can hit the unit you're engaged with. You can even, and it's something that people don't realise, if there's a character in a unit and you're only in base contact with the character, it's still part of the unit. So you can just hit the normal guys. You don't have to hit the character. Although sometimes it's advantageous to. Always allocate 1 attack on the champion. People never do it. Can a close order unit of 1 model claim the close order combat result? Yes, providing it's got high unit strength, because obviously that's changed to 10 now. So you need to have 10. If 1 participant in challenge causes impact hits or stomp attacks, where are they directed? So impacts are for 4 challenges, and stomp attacks may be directed against the other participant in the challenge. So stomps are in the challenge, impact hits are outside of challenge. So if you've got a character in a chariot you charge a unit, the impact hits will hit the unit and then will count for combat res, so you're not so susceptible to killing the champion with your character and then losing damage from the other aspects of the model. It says, when a unit counter charges, it rolls d3 plus 1 to determine how far it moves. Is this roll counted as a charge roll? No. I guess that's for rules that say, like, when you make a charge roll, you can do blah, 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 you know. It's not a charge roll, so you can't re-roll it, things like that. Can't swift stride it, that bollocks. So it says, if a unit with a flight X is engaged in combat, can it use its fly movement characteristic when determining which models are close enough to models in the enemy unit to fight or make supported attacks? No, they only fly whilst moving. Such models are going to have landed. So basically, the fly move is just when you're doing those moves and then you land, so you're like hopping. So I'm not sure how that works for a balloon, but there you go. it's like the balloon doing this, but you get the idea. It says in here, war beast swarms. Do war beasts and swarms have immune to psychology and fear? Fear models that have the flaming attacks? Yes. I mean, fear doesn't really do anything in this edition, so only you worry about it. Used with the motley crew, use their armor value the majority of the models. What if there is an even number of different armor values? In such a case, use the better one. Motley crew's a weird rule. I really wish that gets tidied up in the new edition. I thought they would tidy it up here, to be honest. I find it a very confusing rule. It would be simpler just to say they're armed with all these weapons. Just pick what you want to use each combat and go, rather than mixing them. I know it's a bit of a design aesthetic, but in my head, I can just imagine they've all got stuff to use. So you know, having to individually point and allocate and have the models is a bit wanky. If the winning side of a combat includes one or more units models that cause a terror, do models on the losing side suffer -1 to their leadership? That cause fear or terror suffer the -1. No, because you're not affected by those things. You don't suffer the effects of terror. So that's another one I saw people say, that if you were a terror causer and you lost to a terror causer, you still get the -1. But that's an effect of terror, and it says that you're not affected by terror. So that's just to clarify. I've seen that argued, so it's good to see that. Can my battle standard bearer have a higher leadership than my general? So actually, this is quite interesting. No, the character has to be the highest leadership. So it means that you can't take, for example, like an elf battle standard, because they're higher leadership in an army where you've got a Sister of Avalon as a general. Whereas before, I think people played you could, because you just said, well, he can't be the general, so it has to be the other model, which is a bit of a blow, but I guess it makes sense. Can a character that has joined a unit of models for different troop type be targeted by enemy shooting? For example, if a character troop is light chariot joins a unit of regular infantry, can they be targeted? Yes. I don't think you could put light chariot in infantry, but maybe I'm wrong. And they don't get a lookout cert either, because that's the change into the rules that we've seen, the clarity on that. If a character joins a unit that carries a magic standard, do its effect extend to the character? Yes, you're part of the unit. Pretty obvious. We've got some, when deploying armies, must units be placed completely within the deployment zone? Yeah, I don't know why that got asked. If a spell arcane agency is used to move a random movement, can the unit move into contact with an enemy unit? It says no. Whilst a unit with random move can move into base contact with an enemy during the compulsory move subphase, arcane urgency is a move during the remaining move subphase. So I'm not even sure you can do it, because I think you must have already, I don't know if compulsory is at the end. I have to look at the timing, but yeah. So basically, you can't charge a random move thing with arcane urgency. Can a unit which Earthen Rampants has been cast make a counter charge? No, obviously. If a unit charges an enemy unit which with Earthen Rampants be cast, it must follow all the rules for charging an enemy behind a defended low linear obstacle, even though there's no such physical terrain. Yes, a unit upon which Earthen Rampants have been cast counts as it being behind a defended low linear obstacle. Think of the spell's effect as representing a magically manifested obstacle rather than physical terrain feature. So that does mean that it's difficult ground. You're going to have to roll dice, pick the lowest. You're going to be disrupted. You're not going to get your initiative, but all that kind of stuff. So it's actually really strong, and this is quite good for entrenchment for dwarfs as well, because it's the same rules. What happens if a scroll of transmogrification is used on a bound spell? It says after testing against the item's power, it may be turned into an animate frog, rendering it useless until it turns back. You may roll a d6 for each transmogrified item to see if it returns to normal. So you don't transform the model, you transform the item. So you can turn their ruby ring into a frog. They have a little slimy frog on their finger, disgusting. But it's quite interesting. It doesn't actually do the bearer. Like, it's not actually the model that's got the ring, it's just the ring. That's quite cool imagery, actually. I do like those arcane frogs. I just don't see the point. I don't see them come up very often to have them, but yeah, they are cool. Right, that's the main FAQ. So huge change to infantry. The regen save, I think, is big. Lots of changes to magic, lots of changes to casting, changes to weapons, massive changes. So what does that mean in summary? That means that wizards are going to be less effective. Vortexes are now less controllable and a little bit easier to get rid of. Infantry is going to be better. Having mixed weapons is better. Models in challenges like single dragons and things like that are less effective. Impetuous isn't as bad. I personally think they are all great changes. I don't think any of those changes make no sense or break the game in a bad way or nerf anything that probably was a bit too powerful. So I pretty much think all of those changes are great. I think that's amazing. And I think now we'll start seeing infantry a lot more often on the table, which is a good thing, because that's really, it shouldn't just be Warhammer and not have hammer and anvil hammer, because basically we need some more anvils and less hammer in a lot of these games, so that's good. So, Forces of Fantasy. We have some changes. So And straight away, Anvil of Doom, bound spells level of 2. So obviously this is to reflect the fact that enemies are only +3 and +2, not +3 or 4, which is fine. The Oath and Steel is changed to 8 and 11. If it's 8 or more, so you get to re-roll armor saves, and if it's an 11, I think you can pick multiple units. Hearth and Home is on an 8. I mean, these are 6s basically. Hammers now have Grumwell armor, thank you. Which they should have always had Grumwell armor in my, so that's an amazing change. That means they get to reroll 1s on their saves. Runes of Protection change the rule as follows. Models with this special rule have a 6-up ward against any wounds suffered that were caused by a non-magical enemy attack. I believe that is the Ironbreaker rune, and I think the runes of warding are the Iron Drake one. Trollhammer Torpedo, strength of 5, it's lost dwarf crafted, and it's cumbersome. So obviously there was a lot of people taking like min units of 5 with Trollhammers, and they were like better than War Machines and like basically less points or around the same points. So now they're only strength 5, they're cumbersome, and they're not dwarf crafted, so you get modifiers for stun and shoot. That's a really good change, I think. Like, I mean, we're planning to take Trollhammer to the doubles. So maybe we don't anymore. We take blasting charges. I don't know, but blasting charges, the bombs, cinder blast bombs. That's it. But anyway, I think it's a good change. I mean, you should to get a strength 8 multiple wound thing, you need to buy a cannon, not 5 guys holding a torpedo, which is way better than a cannon. So you just didn't take cannons. Rune Law. Again, we've still got the Unbind, and it's +1, +2, +3. So the Anvil of Doom actually is better than Unbinding than a level 4, which is amazing. So really happy with that. General of the Empire and Captain Empire, their leadership's been improved. The leadership 10, which is good, I suppose. I mean, it makes sense, but you know, you now have the Horde rule on state troops and veteran state troops list of special rules. Great swords, strength characteristic to 4, thank you. So they now are strength 6, which makes them a lot better. Obviously a bit of buff there to Empire, which is good. It's nice to see. Royal Pegasus, those points have gone up. Pegasus Knights, their points have gone up. Lancer formation has been removed. The Falcon Horn, this is such a good change. Single use, and you've got to take a leadership test. If you fail the test, it does nothing, and you still use it. So the Falcon Horn now is a 1 and done. Probably needs its points reduced for that, but hey ho, I'm not gonna complain. Burning Gaze, casting value change. Obviously, this is to do with the magic changes. So there's a change to treatment. I think that's so they just say they know spells from one of the laws, not mix and match. I don't know much about Wood Elves. Sisters of Thorn, randomly generated spell. I hope they do this with Jade Sentinels in Cafe as well. And they can choose their signature. So basically it means you can't just take for the best spell you want on all of them. They need to do that with the Sentinels, the Jade Sentinels. Woodland Ambush. Once players have finished placing terrain, Wood Elves player may place 1 additional wood. Measure no more than 3 at its narrowest, no more than 9 in its widest. I think that's an increase in size, because previously it was like a little circle. It was kind of shit. I think it's a 5-inch circle. So this is now like nice. You can have a proper wood. So it's actually pretty decent. Casting value changes again. White Lions now have Furious Charge, which is good. They sound like they should. Hand of Cain, cast resist again. Tutoring Guard, delete Gardens of the Temple from special rules. Arcane Journal, High Elf Realms. So Warriors of the Wilderness. So once players have finished placing terrain, Assuration War Host may place 1 additional wood. Again, that's increase in size. So the Ring of Fury is a hammer hand with a bound level of 1. So it's again because of the magic changes. Again, changes to the magic. Spiteful Torrent, which is the Vortex. Again, it's the same thing, that if you move through it, you take the damage. Another change to casting. So a lot of these are just to make them in line with the new magic changes. That's why I wanted to do that first, because if I was doing this, you'd be going, what? Dwarf Mountain holds. Can I give armor runes to the Anvil of Doom? Does the Anvil itself benefit or just the crew? Just the crew. Now, I think that's because if you shoot at the Anvil, you use the Anvil's toughness. And one of the things that's really nice to put on an Anvil of Doom is the Rune of Adamant to make it toughness 10. And I think that you only benefit that if you're in close combat with it. So still good, because I think the Anvil's toughness 7 anyway. Can the champion in a unit of Royal Clan warriors or hammers put weapon runes on a Gromrel Great Axe or Great Hammer? Now, because they have different great weapons, normally you can put runes on a great weapon, but they're not great weapons. They have special weapons. So no, you can't. They're unique, so you can't do that. Why would you put points on it? I don't know. Empire of Man. Does the Griffin standard allow a unit to claim a higher rank bonus than normal for its troops type? Yes. A unit carrying the Griffin standard can claim a rank bonus of +2 for each rank behind the first rather than usual +1. Therefore, a unit with 2 extra ranks could claim +4 rather than usual +2. So that's pretty good. Arcane Journal. If Harold Gemmenson issues a second challenge, using his skilled duelist special rule, he can fight immediately. Can his opponent in that challenge fight again? Yes, if it's accepted and fought immediately, meaning Harold and his opponent can fight. However, his mount may not fight, and nor may his opponents. So I think that's because in a challenge you both fight. So it's like there's some. I haven't read the Arcane Journal for Empire in very much detail. I do plan on reviewing that soon, so I will get to it. I wanted to hold off reviewing the factions because I knew there was coming a big FAQ, and that's going to skew the rules so much that actually everything becomes. My opinion on viability or how you use it will change because the rules change. Like before, I'd say, don't give them this and this, just give them shields. Whereas now I might say, you could buy the halberds because in this situation you might want to change. For example, like Tomb Guard's prime example. Anyway, side note, I will be doing full faction reviews now that all this is out. And the match play guide is basically out there. I'm going to do a show on that as well. But that's a sidetrack. A unit of Empire Road Wardens may replace its crossbows with brace of pistols. If it does, must the captain champion pay an additional +2 to do the same? No. If the entire unit does it, then it includes the captain. Bretonians. Can a unit with defensive stake be hit by impact hits or stomp attacks by a charging enemy? Yes. While the stakes might do tremendous damage, they charge will carry them to the archers. They be turned into kindling in the attempt. So basically, yes. What happens if a unit in lance formation declares a charge, finds its movement blocked by the presence of an enemy unit to its flank, where the unit gets wider? These are covered in the rules for accidental contact. If the lance can wheel around the enemy unit, it should do so. If not, you halt the charge or continue ahead, make contact with the enemy, treating it as a redirected charge. Okay. And then Arcane Journal for High Elves. Can Corhill, Lionmane, or the Thracian Chief join a unit of White Lions? Yes. I mean, if you couldn't, that'd be dumb. So that's the Forces of Fantasy. So not really big changes in there. Obviously, some changes to Dwarf runes. The biggest one's probably the Trollhammer Torpedo, the Woods. The Pegasus Knight nerfs is pretty big, and the Falconhorn Bretts have been pretty hammered with the Vanguard, the Exile list, particularly with the Vanguard rules as well. I'm not sure it's that warranted, but I mean, they are pretty good. I think Cathay might need this treatment as well soon, so we'll see. I think they're going to be, with all these nerfs and Cathay being basically untouched, I think Cathay are going to be new kids on the block for a while, unfortunately. So I think they're going to be the ones to beat. So when you design your army list, make sure you're thinking about Cathay because they're going to be pretty egregious. But some of the changes we've seen in here, like not being able to pick your spell but randomly, that should be applied to Jade, in my opinion, and things like that. So there should be some changes to Cathay to make them in line with this. Whether we'll see that in a couple of weeks as a separate document or we have to wait till December, see how things lay. I'm kind of more for one letting things settle and see how it plays, because I think that's the approach the Old World team have taken. I think it's worked really well because we're getting to the point now where the game's very matured and informed decisions, rather than in other games, I won't name names, Age Sigmar, where they make knee-jerk reactions and the meta's flopping around like a fish out of water and everyone's scrabbling on eBay and chucking shit on the table to be competitive, and then people are winning because they're using bent combos, not because they're actually good at the game. I actually argue that player skill in AOS is a lot lower than what you need in Old World. Well, I would say that, I'm a bit biased, but I do think the game skill in Old World is way higher. And what I mean by that is if you give a good list to a weaker player, they're clearly going to lose. Whereas in AOS, you give a weak player a good list, they're probably going to win more than they should do. Anyway, different topic. So, Ravening Hordes. Let's go. Release the Fanatics. Unless it's fleeing or a marching column, a concealing unit may release one or more of its fanatics during the start of turn sub phase. This is to kind of stop the marching column up, release the fanatics. Troll mobs, add motley crew to the troll rules, and they can mix their weapons. So it might be alright to have one with a great weapon in there. Pogo's pig sticker, Porco's even, I should say, only applied during the turn it charged. Brainbuster changes, that's just to do with the magic changes. Character mounts. So this restriction means that aspiring champions can now be on demonic mounts. Well, I see it very often, but pretty cool. This is pretty good. Chaos Dragons. Exalted champions and Chaos Lords only. And Manticore. Exalted champions and Chaos Lords only. This gives Chaos the ability to take flying monsters with a cheaper hero on it. With a lot of the match play restrictions we've seen, I think one of the restrictions if average your points or 25%. That's actually really good because it means you can actually put some kit on an Exalted on a dragon and you get a slightly worse hero, but he's still an Exalted champion. They're still pretty good. So it gives you some flexibility and lift writing. So I actually like this change quite a lot. And in fact, having an Exalted on a Manticore does sound pretty cool. You got Chaos Troll, again, Motley Crew. And we get the rule that we were campaigning for. Chaos Knights have countercharge finally. So Chaos Knights can countercharge. Happy days. That's made my weekend. That's it. Now I'm going to sign off. Done. No. And Chaos Dragons are impetuous. So that means that a Chaos Dragon might not always behave. Yeah, it's a leadership test, so it's leadership 9 or 8 if you rolled the demonic gifts, use 10. But there's a chance. And with the changes to challenge and infantry, that could really screw you. I still kind of like it. I like the idea of having my Chaos army not always behaving. So I think that's great. So it changes to Demonic Splendor and Enchanting Aura. So this is the strike last one. This is the -1 to hit with shooting. Both no longer on monsters. So infantry, cavalry, and not chariots either, which is the important one. Infernal Puppet. Unless the owner of the Infernal Puppet is fleeing or engaged, they may use it whenever an enemy is within 15. So they've reduced the range because Infernal Puppet was amazingly broken. It was so good. Dragon Ogres have gone up in points, which is probably viable because they're pretty baller. Skeleton Chariots have come down in points, never really see them. Vortex of Souls, Casket Bound level, obviously that's to do with the changes. Flailess Skulls, that's to bring in line with the flail changes. It only applies on the round they charge. Again, that probably makes it even worse. They could probably make that a lot cheaper. Desiccation, casting values dropped, obviously because of the magic thing. Then we've got the Arcane Journals. So there are other changes to those factions when we get to the journals. So the Skull Smasher, you must choose which Kicknick will use, which is, I think that just means you can change between rounds. Again, the Whirlpool, which is the Vortex changes. So it scatters and it does damage and it's difficult. Torrent of Filth and Rapid Regen, the Troll Law, these are just changes to bring in line with, what we talked about. Accurate Axe, Strength modifier only applies if you charge. So again, that only on the charge, so it makes some of these weapons a little bit less viable. So Storm's Wrath only on the turn you charge. Nothing else has changed for Arcane Journal for Warriors. Beastman Bray Herds. I'm going to do an Arcane Journal review on that. I've got it queued up. This all started to happen, so I've been distracted. I will get to it. So this is the +1 casting modifier, because obviously pluses to cast now become very, very powerful. So this is saying now that because it was double in effect basically. If one or more friendly wizards that are not fleeing have not succumbed to stupidity or within command range, if they roll a natural double 1, roll immediately on the miscast as normal, but apply the result to the great shaman or brave shaman that made and the attempt and each wizard within range. So basically, that's just capping the +1. Okay. Casting value on Strangle Root and the Banner of the Warp Moon, which is a single use now. Which I believe is probably the no-fly thing. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's single use. Tomb King. So big change to Mortuary Cult here. You can only do this once per turn to get your casting bonus. And your maximum is +1. So you cannot do +3, +4, multiple times. It's just +1 once per turn. Big change, big nerf. And then you've got changes to the flail, which again is just on the turn you charge. Stone Shaper. And then you can, until the end of this turn, the nominated unit improves the regen by 1. I think it used to run to your next turn, so made that a little bit worse. So the question about Black Orc bosses, this just means that you have to play Nomadic War to take the chariots. Can the Infernal Puppet be used against a bounce spell? Yes. When fighting a warrior's duel, are such things as magic standards by the units counted? No. They're basically alone without their unit support. If a character joins a unit of Skinwolves, can they be transfigured by the warped form rule? No. That would have been cool, though. Maybe they need a warp form hero or something to go in there. So that's it for all the erratas and FAQs and changes. What do you think? Let me know below. I'm really happy with the changes. I think it's going to make a massive mix-up of the game. I think we're going to see magic still going to be effective, but if spells go off less. Things like casting bonuses, I think bigger units are going to be the way forward rather than MSU, or many small units is the buzzword from back in the day, which was how I was playing my warriors, and most competitive lists were like that, to be honest. The no charge Vanguard, I mean, there's so many changes. Let me know what you think your favourite one is. It could be the challenge, could be the magic changes, could be the infantry changes. Personally, I'm pretty happy with all of these. And when I play warriors and the close order change and things like that, and the dragon change and the points cap from will affect my list in quite a big way. But I still think I can write competitive lists, and I quite like that I have to adjust what I'm doing a little bit. Which is play cafe until they change. No, I'm joking. Not really. Yeah, it would be interesting to see if we see any adjustments to cafe on release. I know in Age of Sigmar and 40k, they tend to FAQ the new book within a month of it coming out. I'm not so sure we'll see anything because Old World's a different beast. That might mean that cafe are ruling the roost for 6 months to a year. We'll see what happens. I mean, we did see that there was an article talking about the second journal, and the second journal is not going to have any new models. It's just going to have Army of Infamy where you mix Empire in, and there's some changes, which is quite nice because I want to do some Avalon models, so maybe I can mix them in. So we'll see what that means for the Grand Army of Cathay in the next few months, because I think they're going to be fairly good and fairly competitive. I'm really interested to see if there's units you didn't consider before in the infantry side of things that you now think are going to be decent. Personally, I'm really excited to use these new changes with my dwarf army. I still think they're going to struggle a bit, but I do really like the idea of the hammers having Cromwell armor and the infantry just being a lot better, which is cool. But let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you found this useful, of me going through it and talking about what the changes actually mean, because sometimes an FAQ or an errata, you read it and go, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. Is that the same? And then you actually look at the rules and you look at the detail and you go, actually, this means that. that's a big change. Like the regen's a prime example. I think a lot of people will miss that. If there's anything else you want me to cover, or you got any questions, pop them below. I'll get to you. All right, thank you very much for watching. Have a good evening, and I'll catch you in the next one, which will be the General's Handbook review. And I'll be trying to get that out this week as well. So trying to smash the content at the moment. So leave that like, subscribe. It helps me out, and you can click through any affiliates, so that also helps me. So I appreciate it, guys. And just a reminder, Facehammer GT is September. Get your tickets. It'll be using the handbook, match play guide. All these new FAQ and erratas will be in effect. It's a really exciting time. I think it's going to be a great event. So please get there, support, have some good games, have a nice weekend, have some beers, and roll some dice. That's what it's about, guys. So I'll see you later. Thanks for watching, and have a good evening.